Hey, welcome back. Paul Casper here, and today we're going to talk about the wonderful world of symbols. So far, all we've really done is learn how to manipulate the timeline and draw with some of the drawing objects Flash has to offer. The real power in Flash obviously comes during the animation process, and in particular with things called symbols. So, what exactly is a symbol? Well, to start, symbols are basically just a format that any artwork or object on your stage can get converted to. When you create a symbol, its base art is stored over in the library, so we're going to get used to working in the library. And we can also include instances of those symbols on the stage. To break it down, an instance is basically a copy or a duplicate of any symbol. So, a few things, and I'm just going to go over the handout here and highlight some of the things in the week 3 handout that I want to tell you about. Then we're just going to jump in and we're actually going to convert our fish animation from last time into symbols that will then set us up for something called motion tweening in the next lesson. So, highlights of symbols. 1, symbols are reusable. So, for instance, I've got a group of objects here. This smiley face, they're reusable. First, we have to actually convert the artwork into a symbol. To do that, we simply can go up to Modify menu and choose Convert to Symbol. In the Convert to Symbol dialog box, we're going to be able to give our symbol a name and also choose a type. When it comes to symbols, they come in 3 flavors: a movie clip, a button, and a graphic symbol. The 2 we're going to focus our most attention on are going to be movie clip and button, and we're going to start with movie clip. So one thing we definitely need to do to stay organized is to name our symbols. So I'm just going to go ahead and just call this smiley, and I'm going to add a tag after it going _MC. It's a good habit just to go and name your files with all lowercase letters, and we can use something called camel case, and then I'll talk about that in a little bit, and then also we're going to give it the tag of _MC to let us know, hey, this is a movie clip type of symbol. We're going to click OK, and notice our piece of artwork. Couple things: our smiley face, now when we have it selected, our properties panel, if you look over here on the left, is now filled with all kinds of new options we did not have when it was just artwork. We can also give our symbol, in this case a movie clip, an instance name. So an instance name is how you name a particular piece of artwork or symbol for use with ActionScript. So the only time you really need an instance name is when you're targeting with code. Also in the properties panel, you can switch what type of symbol it is: movie clip, button, or graphic. We're going to stick with movie clip. But I also want you to go over and look over at the library and notice we've now got some artwork in the library. When you make a symbol, that symbol is automatically added to the library. What's neat is that you can actually drag copies of this artwork onto your stage. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag another smiley face over there, and maybe one more as well. Essentially what I just did is I drug 2 copies of the original symbol to the stage, but they are all exactly the same piece of art as what we have in the library. We're going to get into how we can modify those actually in a little bit. Again, symbols lets us add interactivity through ActionScript as long as it has an instance name. Artwork contained in a symbol is actually protected the same way that artwork in a group is protected. So in order to change the artwork in a symbol, you've got to work in symbol isolation mode. So just double click on your symbol, and when you do that, notice here we're in symbol isolation mode. We can then work with the properties of this object that we had before, so the position and size, because this is a group. If I actually ungrouped that artwork, so modify, ungroup, I could control each piece of these, change the fill and stroke. So in symbol isolation mode, you can actually change the base art of a symbol. To exit isolation mode, I'm going to double click and get out of it. Another thing, when you're in isolation mode, however, is I want you to take a look at the timeline. Symbols have their own timelines. So this is a little bit one of those things that are a little bit tough to grasp at first, but we can have timelines within timelines. I know, right? Crazy. Again, symbols selected on the stage have extra properties. Notice that you can work in 3D when it comes to symbols. So we can change 3D properties. We can also add filters. So filters are going to act a lot like our layer styles in Photoshop do. So that's fantastic. And there's a couple other things we can mess with just on your own. So, symbol. This is a movie clip. If we want to actually change some of the properties, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to change this first one. Maybe change the color effect. I'm just going to change the tint, I guess. See what I can get out of this. Darken it up a little bit here. So notice how I'm just changing the color of this particular instance. Remember, an instance is a copy of the main symbol from over in the library. But each instance, you can control the properties individually. So maybe on the filter, down the lower left-hand corner, if you hit the new filter, I'm just going to add a drop shadow. And notice that this instance has a drop shadow where I just changed some of the color properties of this one, and maybe this third one down here. What should we do? I don't know, let's see if we can change just some 3D positioning. Move the XY, move it back in Z space. That'll be fun. And even with these tools that we haven't used yet, the 3D rotation and 3D translation, maybe I'm going to work in 3D here and twist this instance a little bit. So let's see how the 3D stuff works there. So again, these are all exact copies of the piece of artwork over in the library. The difference is they're all separate instances. So I like to think of this a little bit like if we had a symbol called human, each one of us has a different name, and that's how come people can talk to us. So when using ActionScript, all of our different people need to have different names so we know who the script is talking to. It's not unlike this instance thing here. Everyone looks a little different. Everyone's got different colored mouths, right? Of course. It's all good. If we wanted to change the base art of a symbol, if we are in isolation mode of that symbol, we can actually select any of the pieces, and I'm just going to change the eyes from green to maybe blue on each one, and I'm going to change the mouth to more of a red/maroon color and change the alpha to 100% on that. Notice when I exit isolation mode, every symbol that was an instance of that base artwork over here from the library now takes those properties. We can't see that change take effect on this first one because we've actually changed the color effects and changed the tint of that. But if we took the color effect off and chose none, notice how it's got the same colors. So if we change any symbol in isolation mode, what's going to happen is any instance of that symbol is going to take on the same properties. So we've got to be very careful that we're only changing the art that we want to. Movie clips are going to be our favorite kind of symbols because they do give us so many options here over in the properties, and they also give us a good way to do some more advanced animation called motion tweening. Instead of selecting artwork first and then going modify, convert to symbol, we could always just go to insert new symbol and give our symbol a name right off the bat. So I'm just going to call this new _MC just for illustration sakes. And I'm going to keep it a movie clip. Click OK. But when we do that, notice our symbol is blank. There's no artwork associated with it. So you can create a symbol first and then draw your art after the fact. But I find this slightly tedious and slightly painful, where I'd rather have the artwork first and just convert it down the road. Nothing wrong with doing it this way, I just find it easier to do it the other way. The most efficient way that I find converting my artwork to symbol, because as we obviously know, I work a lot in Illustrator first, I'll actually convert my pieces that I want to control individually from Illustrator and convert them to symbols before they even get into Flash. I like to do it this way because I want to animate in Flash. I don't want to use all these other controls if I don't have to. So the more I can do up front, the better. And if you're an Illustrator power user, you can also just create your symbols directly in Illustrator, so when you bring all that stuff in, you're going to be good to go. So a few different ways of that. If we wanted to make the change to a symbol, but we wanted to actually make it to a different piece of artwork, I'm just going to move these over. So say I wanted to have a smiley face and I want to change how it looks, but I don't want to change every instance. There's a couple different ways you can actually go ahead and do that. The first way is I'm just going to drag a fourth copy of the smiley face over here from the library. And you can actually select it, go to Modify, and Break Apart. Notice Command B is the quick key to break it apart. When you break apart a symbol instance, you actually are converting it into its own piece of artwork. So notice that this object selected, if I look over the properties, it's no longer associated with that symbol of smiley. If I select this one, notice instance of smiley. I select this one, because it's broken apart, it is now just treated as a plain drawing object. So if you want to ever take a symbol and make modifications without affecting all the instances, simply break that symbol apart, or an instance of that symbol, and then you can get in and you can change any of the properties that you want, just like it's a regular drawing object. You can also select that symbol over in the library, and you can right click on that symbol and duplicate it. So when you duplicate that, basically I'm just going to give this a smiley 2_MC and delete the copy. I'm going to click OK. And now when you select smiley 2, you can drag that symbol to the stage, and then within isolation mode you can make any of the changes that you want to without impacting any of the other pieces of artwork that you currently have. Notice how when I select this object now, I look up in the properties panel and it's a copy of there's an instance of the smiley 2 movie clip. Now if I wanted more of the smiley 2s, simply go to the library, click and drag, and add continual instances. Again, you only need to really use instance names when you're using ActionScript. Sometimes at the beginning I make you guys actually name all the stuff right off the bat just to get in good habits and good practice, but I'm not going to make us do it in this moment right now. You can also select any symbol on the stage and go to Modify, Symbol, and Duplicate. When you do that, notice you're also giving it a name, so I'm just going to duplicate that one. I'll maybe call this one Smiley 3. Click OK. And when you do that, if you go over into the library panel, notice that we've got ourselves now a Smiley 3. So that's just really the long way then to right click over in the library panel to duplicate. Either way is going to work the same, and again, because I'm working Smiley 3, by double clicking and getting in symbol isolation mode, I can now change up those properties. And exit. So right here I've got an instance of Smiley 3. Select that. I've got an instance of Smiley 3. This one I select it and I look up in the properties, it's a Smiley 2. This one is a broken apart symbol, so it's just treated just like any drawing object now. Nothing special that I can do with it. And these are all instances of Smiley, the first one, with different properties applied. So that is editing symbols and creating symbols. We need to be very careful when changing them again, because we're going to have to get used to really getting into isolation mode and modifying symbols and then getting back out. Because a lot of times what we're going to have are symbols within symbols and nest our animation, and that's what we're going to do in our next lesson. So that's movie clips. I'm just going to go ahead and delete these movie clips to start, and then I'm going to grab this piece of artwork here, and now we're going to take a look at buttons. Notice when I deleted the movie clips from my stage, if you look over at the library, notice they're still there. The only time that the artwork in the library is going to count against your file size when you publish is actually if you have an instance of it on the stage. So if it's in your library and you're not using it on the stage, it's not going to count against your file size. Now that leads to the point, well, if you're not using it, what's it doing in your library in the first place? And that's a very valid question. So one thing I like to do over in the library before we start talking about our buttons is I like to keep this area clean. Now my new _MC, I don't like that. So if I go into my library and I take a look, notice there's a little mini trash can icon here. If you select a symbol and you trash it, you can delete it from your library, never to be seen again. And I'm just going to make sure I put an instance on my stage here, and when I select Smiley MC, try to trash it, notice it actually deletes it from my library and my stage. So when cleaning the library, make sure you're not deleting any symbols where you've got instances on your stage, because you're going to actually remove that artwork directly from your animation, and notice there's no alert saying, hey, be careful. So we just have to know not to do that. From the library, we can also act a lot like it has in the past, where if we click on a name here, double click it here, you can actually rename it. So if I wanted to name this maybe yellow smiley, and by smiley I meant smiley, we can do that there as well. Just gave it a name. Now take a look at how I actually named this file. Notice how it starts with a lowercase. When I moved to a new word, I did a capital letter. This is called camel case, and this is how most people in Flash actually name their stuff. So that's something I'm going to want you guys to do as you start naming your objects. So if you've got more than one word, just start at the first word in lowercase, and the second word, do a capital, and then it's just going to be easier to read once you get into the code. So it's just good practice to do, and a lot of people do that. So the library, in addition to that kind of stuff, notice how you can create a folder. So this is going to be a lot like the timeline. Create a new folder. Maybe I want to put all my movie clips into a folder, so I'm just going to grab my smiley, drop it in there, and now I can open and close that. So that's fantastic. When you import stuff from other applications, so for Illustrator for instance, you can import that in, and what's actually going to happen is you're going to be given an entire library full of folders, because it recognizes your groups and your layers, and it'll separate them for you. So it's kind of a really nice way to stay organized, and even a better reason to be organized in your Illustrator file. Another thing in the library, before we get into the button symbol real quick, is there's actually a common libraries that comes standard with Flash. So if you go to Window and you can go to Common Libraries, notice that there's a couple different common libraries. Buttons for one, if you open that panel, I'm just going to open this up a little bit so we can see it better. Notice that when you hit these drop downs, you can select different buttons and you can get different looks. So I'm just going to actually grab Bubble 2 Blue just for fun, and I'm going to drag an instance from the common libraries to my stage, and now look over in our regular library. They've been added. So I've got the base artwork and I've got the symbol itself. So I'm going to close up the common libraries, and I've got one button that Flash made for me, and I've got a shape here myself that I want to create my own button with. So remember, when we want to convert artwork to a symbol, we've got to actually select the artwork first, and we've got to go modify, convert to symbol, and this time I'm just going to call this maybe navigation just for fun, and maybe I'm just going to pretend like this is going to be at the top, so I'm going to call it navigation top underscore btn. Now again, I used camel case, so I started with lowercase, hit the second word, so did a capital, and instead of underscore MC that we did for movie clip, we're going to do an underscore btn for the buttons. Of course, in the type, we need to drop down and choose button. That's fine and dandy. And let's go ahead and click OK. When we do this, watch what happens to our library. We get a new icon with a navigation top underscore btn. Now, anytime I make a button, I almost always, right off the bat, give it the instance name. Why is that? Well, what's the point of a button if you're not going to make it interactive? And one of the biggest things we run into when we start doing our coding is we forget to actually name our buttons with instance names to make them work. So if you do this right off the bat, you're going to know it's done, and that's why I like to do it. So I'm just going to give it the exact same instance name as the name of the piece of artwork. So navigation top underscore btn. We can retype that, or I'm just going to copy the text from the library, put my cursor over in the properties, hit Command V, paste it in there, and now I select my artwork. It's got a name, so I'm set up for coding when I need it. So remember our symbols, the movie clip symbol, when we double clicked on that, it had its own timeline. Same thing with the button, only with a button, when you double click on it, you actually get these up, over, down, and hit options. I'm going to get out of isolation mode of the one that I just made. I'm going to get into isolation mode of the enter button that Flash gave us, and check out the layer structure of the enter button. I'm going to hit Command Return so we can actually see how this acts when we publish it. So this is the up state. So this is how it looks when the user enters the site. Over is what happens when a user hovers over it. Down is when your mouse is actually clicked down. And hit is an invisible area that the cursor will actually turn into a hand when the mouse hovers over it. So notice on the hit state, it doesn't actually turn into a hand to click until you hover over the blue part itself. So this artwork was all created on these different layers. And we've got text. You know, we can hide and show these different layers just like we can with any other piece of art. The only difference is these pieces of art are created inside of a button symbol instead of a movie clip or just regular artwork. So the timeline for a button works exactly the same, except for your scrub is more limited to an up, over, down, and hit state. Once we get into buttons a little bit more deeper, we can actually I'll talk about how we can actually embed a movie clip into a button to create an animated button, but for now we're just going to keep it pretty simple as we look at this. So I'm going to exit isolation mode of the bubble to blue that Flash gave us, double click on my button that I created, the navigation top button, and notice there's a very simple timeline, one layer. Of course we want to name that, so maybe I'll just call this rectangle. And maybe I want to put a new layer on there called text. And I'm just going to use my type tool to add some amazing looking type on this. And I'm going to select the text, go over to the properties, maybe change the color to white, and change the size. And with my selection tool here, I'm just going to move it into place. Maybe I even want to select both pieces of art, go to the Align panel and align them center to be really fancy. So in isolation mode again, navigation top button, I've got text on top, and I've got a rectangle underneath. So this is just like when we drew artwork in a previous lesson. Now we're going to use our keyframe based animation, and again I like to hold the Option key when I duplicate previous keyframes, and we're going to create the same the button over again. So maybe we want the rectangle to change colors when the user hovers over it. So I'm just going to duplicate the keyframe by holding the Option key, and I'm going to click and drag to the rectangle over state, and I'm going to select that piece of art, go to the properties, and I'm going to just change it to a really amazing bright green color. So now this is a button. Notice we've got text on it, right? When it's up, you can actually read the word type, but then when the user hovers over it, the word type should disappear and the rectangle should turn green. I'm just going to publish the movie to show you what I mean. Now when you hover over it, it disappears. If I want the type to stay there, what I'm going to do is Option drag the type text to the over, Option drag the text keyframe from the up and duplicate it to the over. And maybe I'm going to change the type color from white to black so I can still read it. Now remember, any time that you see a new keyframe, so that's got the dark circle with the gray, that's a new piece of artwork. So the up, even though we made a duplicate of it, we just did that for position, we can actually change the color of that keyframed piece of art to the black. So we got up and over, Command return, just to test it and see. Now we've got the up and the over. So real basic, the timeline of a button symbol works exactly the same as our regular symbols, the movie clips that we use a lot. I'm going to exit isolation mode of the navigation top button we made. And again, I'm going to go ahead and take a couple instances of my navigation top, pull them onto the stage, and again, these are all instances. Notice my first one, remember we gave it the name navigation top underscore btn. The second one does not have an instance name. Chances are we don't want two buttons to go to the same exact place. So by giving it its own individual instance name, I can then control it individually. Sound good? Now, most of the time, however, we're probably going to want to change the type, so we're not going to want the same exact link on every one. So you could always just select your button, and you can right click on it, and where's our duplicate symbol, and when we do that, maybe we don't want navigation top, maybe we want to make this navigation bottom, and get rid of the copy, click OK, and now if I were to change the word type on this to something like amazing, select the text, hold shift while I hit my arrow key to move it over. Notice now it did not change everything because we made a duplicate symbol. Look over at your library. There are two different button symbols we've got there now. And of course, if I wanted to control amazing down the road, I need to give an instance name of like something like amazing underscore btn. Again, buttons, I'm just going to go down to the third instance here. Buttons work a lot like the movie clips. Notice we've got lots of extra stuff we can do. Set our position and size, some different color effects if we want to change how they look. Again, properties are changing only instances. Well, if we wanted to change everything, we'd have to be in isolation mode. So properties are good to use. Just changing a few things here. Notice one thing, that there's no 3D options for a button. But what we could do if we wanted this button to work in 3D is actually take a button symbol, some artwork we created a button out of, and convert the button into a movie clip. So we could have a button inside of a movie clip, then we could do some cool 3D stuff. But that's a little bit beyond where we're actually going to go today. So with that, there's an intro to symbols. Trying to think if there's anything else I want you guys to know about this before we actually get started converting our artwork and doing some animation in the next lesson. So That's it for now. We're going to do some converting during the next lesson. Hope this was a helpful tutorial on what a symbol is and how to manipulate them. See you next time.